Mention the phrase UFO crash, and Roswell, New Mexico immediately comes to mind. It is the most famous UFO incident of all time and marks the year 1947 as the beginning of the modern UFO era. But few people realize it wasn't America's first UFO-related incident. 2 weeks before Roswell, another UFO incident took place over Puget Sound in Washington state. But there are two key differences between this crash in Washington and Roswell. 2 people were killed, and there is still physical evidence left behind.
We found some of the wreckage.
UFO Magazine is one of the leading UFO phenomena publications. For more than 22 years, the publishers have gathered an unprecedented archive of eyewitness accounts, video footage, and never-before-seen documents.
In the world of UFO reports, you got 90% of them total bull. The fact is there are 10% that are absolutely real.
In October 2007, based on brand new leads, they reopened the investigation.
Nobody has been able to solve this case.
From underwater retrieval of unknown material, possibly jettisoned by a UFO.
You can't leave any stone unturned.
To the discovery of unidentified debris buried deep within a remote forest.
Is this a UFO site?
Hey guys, check this out.
And analysis of evidence from a confirmed crash site.
Whoa! Oh, whoa! Are we safe?
Is there a logical explanation? Or is there a connection between this case and the Roswell incident? Science weighs in.
He reported a UFO, and it resulted in a very tragic event.
For the first time on television, what you are about to see is case number 47001, the UFO before Roswell. June 21st, 1947. Over 2 weeks before Roswell, logger Harold Dahl, along with his 15-year-old son and 2 crewmen, are on a boat in Puget Sound near Maury Island, Washington. It is a lazy day in an otherwise unremarkable summer, but at 2 p.m., that all changed. Suddenly, 6 bright metallic donut-shaped discs about 100 feet in diameter appear overhead. One of the craft seems to be malfunctioning. It shudders and tips at precarious angles and appears to be ready to crash into the water. Suddenly, it ejects what is described as a massive amount of steaming metallic debris into the Sound and onto the beach. The debris crashed down onto Dahl's boat, breaking his son's arm and killing his dog. According to their report, the ejection of the material appeared to fix the problem. The 5 other discs then arranged themselves into a formation around the malfunctioning ship, and they all sped off out of sight in total silence. Dahl and his crew gather some of the debris from the water and from the beach. This event was reported to local police. The testimony of all 4 witnesses was consistent. However, all of the witnesses are now deceased.
Pat.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Yes.
Is your gear all packed and ready to go?
Yeah, just about. Almost there.
Good. We have a big case today. We're headed off to Maury Island. I'm Bill Burns. I'm the publisher of UFO Magazine, the only magazine for UFOs in print continuously since 1986. And I've been investigating UFOs for 20 years. We have a really great break in a 60-year-old case that's been lingering. It's been a mystery for 60 years, right here in the state of Washington on Maury Island.
Maury Island, that's the case that started the modern-day UFO wave. My name is Pat Uskert. I'm a frequent contributor to UFO Magazine. My job is tracking down documents and talking to witnesses.
Maury Island, 2 weeks before Roswell, guy out in the boat, sees 6 craft. They drop something on his boat, hurt his son, kill his dog, damage the boat. But we've had a break in the case. After 60 years, we found some of the wreckage. For the first time, we can actually bring stuff back into the lab.
I'll need photographs, archaeological measurements, and samples. Get me samples from the beach, from underwater, from the aircraft site. Get me pieces of the aircraft, samples from the earth around the aircraft. Anything you can get me, I'll analyze it. I'm Dr. Ted Ackworth. I'm a precision metrologist. I have a PhD in mechanical engineering. I study the data, I make an unbiased analysis, and I come to an objective conclusion.
Excellent. Jeff, your job is going to be going out with us. Pat's going to go in the water. You're going to go out and help collect the material and interview witnesses.
We'll bring out some soil samples, some of the debris samples, and we'll bring it back to the lab. I'm Jeffrey Tomlinson. I'm currently doing research in planetary biology and geological phenomena. Scientific inquiry is my mission.
This is it, guys. Nobody has been able to solve this case in 60 years, but we will.
Puget Sound is a huge complex of bays, shallows, and islands, totaling 2,800 square miles of inland marine waters. The team will be going to the waters off the south shore of Maury Island, 47 degrees 35 minutes north, 122 degrees 46 minutes west, approximately 7 miles north of Tacoma.
Our first task is to try to recover some of the material that the UFO jettisoned. Harold Dahl described the material as a sort of metallic slag, and he was very specific about where his boat was when he saw the UFOs. My hope is that I can dive into Puget Sound, survey the bottom, and locate some of this debris.
The debris, or slag, retrieved by Harold Dahl and his crew was reported to be dark stone, lava-like in appearance, with metallic properties. Some have speculated it was in some way connected with the disk's propulsion system. A jet experiencing difficulty will dump its fuel to lighten the load and lessen the chance of fire during an emergency landing. Was this mysterious disk following the same protocol?
Does that water look cold to you?
Oh, it looks cold to me.
Probably about 50 degrees on the surface.
The team is joined by UFO researcher Ronnie Milione to help comb the large area. Pat will be diving into Puget Sound looking for debris. The search area is approximately 6,000 square feet and up to 60 feet deep.
We are approaching the area where the Maury Island UFO incident occurred. The incident involved the dropping of slag from some kind of aerial vehicle into the water and on the beach. I'll be diving, going into the water to look for evidence, maybe at the bottom. The slag is some sort of molten metal. It's basically the same principle as lava. I'm thinking it was metal, liquid metal that was somehow ejected from whatever craft this was, and now might look like rock. The evidence is strong that something real happened here, that maybe there was a UFO incident here, and maybe I will find something, but I can't know until we check it out.
The team is considering a theory. Is it possible the unidentified objects could actually have been nothing more than planes flying in formation?
I'm pretty sure this wasn't an aircraft. It didn't look like an aircraft because it was donut-shaped. It dropped something. Aircraft don't usually drop something. It damaged the boat, it killed the dog, and it injured the son's arm. The day was clear, so he would have known what he was looking at on a clear day. No, I'm pretty convinced this was an unidentified object and not an aircraft.
Pat questions whether the debris will still be at the site.
60 years have passed.
Right.
I wonder what the chances are of some of these pieces of slag still being there.
Pat is a certified scuba diver with more than 18 years' experience. He is searching for UFO debris that is different from the local geology. The debris is reported to appear and feel like lava rock, with a porous surface and jagged serrated edges.
A hand.
Freaking cold.
Good to see your face.
Any slag?
I took some sand samples from the bottom, and I picked up a few rocks that looked like they could be the kind of rocks we're looking for.
Well, we'll see. Climb up, get warm,
that
get your
sounds
body
good.
temperature back to 80.
Saw some stones on the ground that may be related to slag somehow. In doing an investigation like this, you can't leave any stone unturned.
Coming up, is this a piece of material jettisoned by a UFO in 1947?
And the other theory is that they were carrying pieces of extraterrestrial slag.
And could it be that this type of debris somehow caused the deaths of 2 military officers sent to investigate the UFO sighting? In June 1947, over 2 weeks before the reported UFO crash at Roswell, New Mexico, 3 men and a teenage boy on a boat in Puget Sound watched as a donut-shaped metallic UFO, apparently experiencing some sort of malfunction, jettisoned dark lava-like slag just before it stabilized and reportedly zoomed off. Working from the testimony of Harold Dahl, the captain of the boat, the team has located the spot where the debris fell into the water.
You got some samples down there of soil.
I thought it couldn't hurt.
Well, we could classify these pretty quickly, I'm sure. Whoa, hold on, gentlemen. This is very interesting right here. This fits the description of black lava type. I mean, if you look at the structure, just look at the surface structure on it, the texture. Look at compared to the rest of the samples. But this one is definitely unique. This is exactly the description of what we're hearing, and it fits the profile.
The team moves from the dive site to the beach. In order to comb the debris field completely, the team divides the area into a grid of 3-foot by 3-foot sections, beginning at the beach and traveling up the hillside.
Anything there, Bill?
Interesting crystal, look at this.
I'm looking for any kind of rock that would appear like it was some sort of byproduct of a sort of metallic smelting process. Something that was so hot, it melted, liquefied, was ejected or dropped from a donut-shaped UFO and somehow landed on the shore here.
300 feet from the shore, Ronnie finds an L-shaped object, approximately 14 inches long, that seems to fit the description.
One really interesting piece that I found is a piece of slag, I think. Again, we have to really examine it.
Very interesting.
This I found way up there, up in the hill, which is this spot here. And that's I think is the path that if the object was starting to take off, it would have projected this way. What'd you come up with, Pat?
I found them sufficiently interesting. It's kind of striated, it's got a twist to it. It looks like it may have been dripping, like oozing if it was molten at one time and maybe solidify when it cooled.
We found a few pieces on the beach that seem to match the slag that we found in Puget Sound. Lab tests will confirm this or not. We're going to be talking to George Early. He knows these cases. More importantly, he's spoken to all the local people in the area, so he knows the ins and outs of these cases and the details that few people could know just from reading books. Here he comes.
There's George now.
Hi, George. Pull up a log.
Thank you, Bill.
George Early is a UFO researcher and longtime resident of the Pacific Northwest. He was brought in by the team because he has an encyclopedic knowledge of this case and of the events that resulted from this encounter. This is the first time George Early has spoken publicly about his research into this case.
A fellow named Harold Dahl saw up there 6 slightly squashed donuts about 100 feet in diameter with a hole about 25 feet. One of them began to drop massive debris from this hole in the center, which apparently was red hot because he said it hissed when it hit the water, it hit his boat, it hit his son, broke his arm, hit the dog, killed the dog.
According to Early, the story of Harold Dahl's UFO incident reached the Air Force, and 2 intelligence officers were sent to retrieve the possible UFO debris.
The Air Force intelligence people who came were given a box, like so, of fragments which they took kind of reluctantly, but they took them back.
So the Air Force B-25 leaves and heads back to where, Hamilton?
Hamilton Field in California. They went out of McCord Field and they headed south, reportedly at 10,000 feet.
So they're 10,000 feet, and that's when problems start to happen.
Yeah.
According to official Air Corps reports, on August 1st, 1947, 40 days after the incident, Harold Dahl reported that he was visited by, quote, 2 military intelligence officers who took from him the pieces of debris he and his men collected. The officers brought the specimens on board a B-25 bomber, which was to take them from McCord Air Force Base in Tacoma, Washington, to Hamilton Air Force Base in Northern California. What happened in the minutes after takeoff is the biggest mystery of the Maury Island incident. The plane had been thoroughly inspected and overhauled just 2 weeks before. Yet 20 minutes after taking off, the plane crashed in the remote wilderness outside of Kelso, Washington. 2 passengers parachuted to safety, but the 2 pilots died in the crash. According to official Air Corps reports, the plane was brought down by a fire in an internal junction box. But some UFO researchers believe the UFO debris in the cargo hold may have triggered a series of events that brought the plane down.
I think we've done enough here. We're off to Kelso. Kelso is where the plane wreckage is. We're going to do a grid search. We're going to look for plane parts. We're going to walk the area.
The answers may lie on Kelso.
Indeed, off to Kelso.
On the way to the Kelso crash site, Pat insists the team stop at the library to see if town archives could provide further information about the crash.
So, Pat, what have you found?
Check this out. You were right.
I was right?
The summer of '47 was swimming with saucers. The skies were alive with flying saucers. Look at this. Flying discs now seen in 39 states.
Wow.
Mysterious objects in the sky first began to surface when Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 silvery discs flying over Mount Rainier 3 days after the Maury Island sighting. His story made headlines all over the country. But 2 weeks later, an even bigger story takes center stage.
Here it is, July 7th. Trio describes flying saucers. I'm looking now, I'm trying to see the Roswell connection here. Okay, here we are, July 8th. Army reveals disc is found in New Mexico.
Army reveals disc found in New Mexico. Unbelievable.
Wow, okay.
The summer of the saucers.
Right.
Okay, let's go to August 1st and see what we can see. There you go.
August 1st.
Look at this.
Wow, what is that? Look at that. Front page news.
Right.
Okay, and if that's not enough, check this out. I was checking the internet earlier, and what I found here was an article on the nephew of one of the pilots.
Whoa.
Lieutenant Brown's nephew, or great-nephew. His name is Barry Fisher.
Wow. What are the odds on this? Let's call him. Let's see if we can hook up with him and call him. Let's bring him to the site.
Coming up, the team scours the B-25 crash site for evidence.
There's not a lot of it left, but it's still here.
And find something they hadn't expected.
So we got a hotbed here.
On August 1st, 1947, after a reported UFO event, 2 military intelligence officers board an Air Force B-25 bomber to bring mysterious pieces of metallic debris, supposedly jettisoned by a UFO, back to Hamilton Air Force Base for analysis. A mere 20 minutes after takeoff, an intense fire of unknown origin breaks out inside the plane. One of the survivors who parachuted to safety later recalled that the fire was so intense and spread so quickly that there was no time to try to put it out. Could this fire possibly be connected to the samples of mysterious debris the plane was carrying? The team from UFO magazine has decided to examine the remains of the plane wreckage to see if the crash is somehow connected to the UFO sighting off Maury Island.
We made the trip from Maury Island up here to Kelso. We're investigating the crash of the B-25 in this area. This is a really puzzling case. I mean, is it all coincidence that there was a huge UFO incident and then a crash after the officers investigated that incident? Maybe I'll have some answers today. We'll find out.
Here we are, guys. Garth.
Howdy. Garth
Good to see you,
Baldwin.
my friend. Mr. Baldwin, how are you?
Garth Baldwin is a Washington state archaeologist and expert on the topography and history of the Kelso area. For the first time, the team is getting a look at the site of the actual plane wreck. If reports are correct, this site may contain UFO debris.
This is the Goble Creek Valley where the crash took place. The left wing came down in the open valley just over here around the corner if we want to go take a look at that.
Yes, sir.
Garth is a professional archaeologist. He'll be helping us examine this area. That's really what we need to do to make this investigation the best that it can be. We need to bring in the pros. In this case, we have the guy to examine the wreckage.
This is where the left wing came off. It came off from the fire at the engine. So the plane lost its left wing, and then I would guess the wing dropped off and the weight of the other engine as well as its trajectory dropped it this way, and it slingshotted or boomeranged right into the, and it is right around the corner. The crash site is right around that corner there in those trees.
At approximately 2:20 a.m., the plane came in from the northeast and crashed along Goble Creek. The debris field could radiate as far as 1,000 feet from the center point.
This B-25 was carrying some kind of mystery slag from Maury Island. That's the connection here. If there was nothing going on in Maury Island, if there was no slag, if there was no incident, why would these officers be wasting their time carrying slag on their B-25?
In the weeks after the crash, over 300 volunteers removed much of the debris as part of a military operation. What makes this crash so intriguing is that the circumstances surrounding the crash were recorded in the press. According to the Kelsonian Tribune, quote, "The close guard which Army officers established around the crash scene and their refusal to permit any pictures to be taken of the wreckage added to the belief that the plane was carrying secret cargo." But could there be some evidence of this secret cargo left behind?
Could the plane have come down from mechanical failure? Sure, it could have. But we also know that the B-25 Mitchell bomber was notoriously difficult to fly. But there are other facts of this case as well. What was the plane carrying? What was the nature of the material the plane was carrying? This is all evidence we have to examine to figure out why this plane went down.
The team begins searching the site of the plane crash. They face several obstacles in their search.
Garth, where are we?
We're just about there.
The crash happened 60 years ago.
And the little cut ravine beyond is where the crash impact area was.
And the crash site is in the middle of the Washington wilderness, where the vegetation grows very thick and very quickly.
This is the focus of the crash. It was focused right into this little ravine, like a baseball glove. Caught that airplane. Pow.
Finally, the high levels of groundwater makes the soil unstable, and the debris may have sunk deeper underground.
Well, here's the center point of
Right here?
Of the material that we found out here and that's been reported.
Wow, that's
this is
amazing.
about our focus, centroid, if you will. This would be either the framing the motor was hung on, or the protective cage around the nose, maybe. It's aircraft aluminum. The metal structure on this is ferrous metal like steel, which is unusual for most parts of an aircraft.
See what it picks up.
Yeah.
So we got a hotbed here
Right
area
here,
of the wreckage.
We have some materials that are definitively from the B-class or B-series planes. There's not a lot of it left, but it's still here. It's obviously aircraft. There's enough aircraft aluminum here. There's stabilizers on it. It looks like some kind of torque bars. There's this flashing, which is usually an indicator of
Heat sink or something.
heating. Yeah, for heat flashing.
Right beneath our feet could be the first real physical evidence of UFOs. If there was something strange in the cargo bay of that craft, then the impact of the crash and the melting and the heat, it might transfer properties of the cargo to the actual airframe.
As quoted in the Department of Justice's Trace Evidence Recovery Guidelines, Locard's exchange principle states that whenever two objects come into contact, a transfer of material will always occur.
If we could find what could have been UFO slag inside the plane that caused the fire, that was near the very hot spot where the fire started, then we'd be able to find the evidence that UFOs were on the plane.
The team creates a circular grid emanating from what Garth has determined is the center. Because environmental law prohibits digging up the soil, the team uses markers to plot points of interest.
There might be a certain pattern that might come out, so I'm more interested in finding something that the aircraft was carrying that caused all the military to come out and do a complete thorough search.
Hey guys, check this out. I got some rubber here.
Is that more your insulation or is that a tire?
These samples will be sent back to the laboratory in Los Angeles and tested for anomalies.
Hey, got a couple soil samples. This one's at the base of the crash.
Super.
This one is from the bank.
Okay, great.
From the engine, 2 meters from the engine.
We've got so much equipment that they didn't have back in 1947. Even though the Army sent out 300 searchers to comb this area, their technology wasn't as sophisticated as what we have now. We've got much more sensitive metal detectors, and we're bringing in ground-penetrating radar to actually see what's going on beneath the earth. Plus, we've got Garth, who's devised the master plan for this search.
The ground-penetrating radar system has an operating depth of approximately 25 feet. The system sends and receives signals to create a 3D underground image of the crash site. Rob Shaw, a specialist from Georadar Imaging, operates the ground-penetrating radar system. This system will let the team see what lies under the forest floor. The team wonders if the UFO debris was so hot, could it have burned its way deep into the earth below the range of metal detectors?
After you collect all this data and if you have it stored on the hard drive and stuff, what is the next step?
When you do the scan, you end up with 2 files. You take and you intertwine those files to make the 3D cube.
The ground-penetrating radar scans each area twice, each time from a slightly different angle. The computer program then merges the 2 slightly different images into a 3-dimensional representation of what lies below the surface of the ground. As Rob continues mapping what lies below the Earth's surface, the team gathers pieces of the B-25. Coming up, science answers some questions and raises many more.
The mystery still lingers.
And the team discovers that not all the evidence is buried. Some of it is alive.
Barry?
The team from UFO magazine combs a supposed UFO-related crash site outside Kelso, Washington. They have set up a search grid and scanned with ground-penetrating radar.
Since we can't really dig underground, we could actually take almost like an X-ray picture of it.
The images from the radar were inconclusive due to the amount of overgrown vegetation and the uneven nature of the terrain.
So the data we're getting from the GPR, the ground penetrating radar, this device really shows us inconclusive data. In fact, the ground, the terrain, it's really difficult for us to physically move the device. And on top of that, the ground is oversaturated with water. It really doesn't provide us with the right amount of data that we need. By all means, it's inconclusive.
The team continues its area search and gets a visitor.
Hello? Hey, are you Pat?
Barry Fisher is the grandnephew of Air Corps pilot Frank Brown, one of the pilots killed during the B-25 crash.
So good to finally meet you. Thank you so much.
Hey, nice to meet you. And hey, I brought you a couple of the copies that we spoke about on the phone.
Oh, fantastic.
Some of the pictures
Wow.
you can kind of see here.
So this is your uncle?
This is my great-uncle.
Great-uncle.
Frank Brown.
During his research of the incident, he made an intriguing discovery.
Now, what's this little article here?
Well, and this is something that I just came by in the last couple of days, and I'm not sure where it came from, but it has his military ID up here. Now, the strange thing about it was, even though he assumed the title of second lieutenant as an intelligence officer, he was in reality a counter-espionage agent.
Interesting.
Barry then says something even more surprising.
After his body was recovered, they gave his personal identification, his military ID, to somebody named Kenneth Arnold. You would think that that would go back to either the military or the next of kin.
Kenneth Arnold was one of the first guys to spot UFOs over Mount Rainier, but I don't understand why he would be given the dog tags.
Harold Dahl witnessed the Maury Island discs on June 21st, 1947. Only 3 days later, on June 24th, flying discs are seen again only 50 miles away, this time by Kenneth Arnold. His report of 9 shiny disc-shaped UFOs flying near Mount Rainier electrified the country. His story appeared in newspapers all over the U.S., making him the world's unofficial expert on UFOs. 2 weeks later, on July 7, 1947, a flying disc reportedly crashed outside Roswell, New Mexico. Is it possible that all 3 of these events are somehow related? Meanwhile, Harold Dahl remained silent about what he had seen. When he finally decided to go public, Kenneth Arnold was asked to meet with him to compare their sightings. After speaking with Dahl, Arnold believed his sighting was real and could possibly have national security consequences. Arnold contacted military intelligence, who came to Maury Island and took the UFO material.
What was the deal with Kenneth Arnold anyway? Why was he being asked to investigate UFO sightings?
After Kenneth Arnold's sighting, the entire country went UFO crazy. A week later, the Army released the story of the crash of a flying disc and its retrieval outside of Roswell, New Mexico. So the Army validated Kenneth Arnold. But because Kenneth Arnold was already the premier UFO sighter in the country, that's why he would do the investigation.
After the death of Pilot Lieutenant Brown, his military identification was given to Arnold.
The more we find out about the relationship between the Kelso case and the Maury Island case, the more we have to ask, why would the Air Force send 2 counterintelligence officers up to investigate this entire case, and why would they bring this slag material back?
Under mounting pressure, Harold Dahl recanted his testimony to the FBI on August 7, 1947. However, until his death, Dahl continued to believe the sighting was real.
There has not been a whole lot of resolution, which has kind of left a bit of a hole in the family, you know, so hopefully we can get a little bit of closure out of what you guys are doing out here.
This doesn't just exist in cyberspace or in some UFO book. This is a real event. And regardless of what Harold Dahl saw, he reported a UFO, and it resulted in a very tragic event.
Whether or not there are slag, it's a good question. In lab, I do expect that we'll find some sort of reaction with the soil, with the organic environment around here.
A link has yet to be established between the material we found on the beach at Maury Island and the material that we've already collected here at Kelso. That physical link can only be established through laboratory testing.
Coming up, the evidence is put to the test. Is the idea of a plane being brought down by a UFO preposterous? Or is it possible that a piece of UFO debris could really burn through an airplane fuselage?
Stand by.
The team's experiment shows it could. In October 2007, with evidence in hand, the team arrives in Los Angeles at the lab of Dr. Sam Iyengar, a research scientist who will use state-of-the-art analytical equipment in an attempt to define the cause of the B-25 crash.
We're here amidst the majestic hills of Orange County at Dr. Sam's lab. We brought a lot of material back from Kelso for Dr. Sam to analyze. We brought back soil samples to see if there is any anomalous material in the soil. We also brought back the rubber gasket from the fuel tank of that B-25. We want to see if a mechanical failure, specifically the electrical fire that one of the tech sergeants talked about, caused the gas tank explosion that brought the B-25 down.
The team is rejoined by MIT scientist Dr. Ted Ackworth, who has just completed testing on the reported UFO debris sample from Maury Island.
Pat dove in Maury Island, Washington State, and most of the rock that he found was rock like this, which is sedimentary rock, very common in that area. He actually found something a little more interesting, which I can imagine he'd be pretty excited about. This sample here, it's actually very light. It's obviously very different from the rock that you see all around that area, color and weight. You see these bubbles or vesicular texture, which is consistent with what you might see with a metal that had been overheated and aerated. So it's something that could look like this slag, some sort of metal that was heated and turned to liquid and fell out of this UFO. What it actually is, though, is igneous rock. It's rock that was formed by volcanic activity and bringing igneous rock up towards the surface from the mantle. I don't believe that it's alien slag, but I could see how Pat may have suspected it could have been.
In search of more results, the team heads for the lab.
Hey Sam, how you doing? Pretty good to see you again, Sam. This is Dr. Sam Iyengar.
Dr. Iyengar will be testing the samples of wreckage for any anomalies. This is the first time that this type of scientific precision has been publicly applied to a UFO investigation.
We'll take measurements off of these samples and look for anything that's anomalous, that's unexplainable. We had a number of soil samples from the site. We had a piece of metal, we believe it was aluminum, and then we had a piece of rubber that we also think was a fragment from the crashed aircraft.
Most of the material you can identify. It's the question of whether it's anomalous or whether it's normal.
We ran a number of conventional metallurgical tests, standard in the industry, transmissive, X-ray. We're bombarding the sample with infrared light.
You look at the molecular vibrations.
We did a couple of X-ray diffraction measurements. We did scanning electron microscope measurements. With this system, we're actually passing X-rays through the material. I think the tests we've run are comprehensive, and they're the right tools for the job. We just need to get lucky and find a sample that has the evidence in the sample.
After completing the tests, the results show an interesting trend.
I took a little sample from the serrated edge of this aluminum piece and then analyzed it by diffraction method. And you can see here's the XRD pattern for it.
So the sample of aluminum generated aluminum and aluminum oxide.
Yes, it's a corroded,
Aluminum oxide is the result of aluminum combining with oxygen, a chemical reaction that results from corrosion or exposure to a high-temperature heat source. All test results show that an extremely hot fire broke out aboard the B-25. This seems to go against another theory, that this was an explosion caused by the gas tank. Next, Dr. Iyengar analyzes soil samples collected by the team from around the crash site.
Here are the X-ray diffraction patterns for the 4 soils. The one near the engine and 5 meters away from the crash, they look almost the same, except why is it sharp? The sharpness in a diffraction is due to the increased crystallinity. One of the ways of increasing the crystallinity is heating.
The crystallinity of the sample underscores how intense the heat was and how all 4 soil samples were affected. But the bigger question still remains. What might have caused the fire that brought the plane down?
If someone simply tells me, oh, maybe there was a spark on the plane, okay, well, I have questions then. How did the spark happen?
Is it possible that this alleged slag material, through some sort of intensive radiation or magnetic field or thermal event, could have brought this airplane down? I'm not sure. We're going to go back to the lab and run some tests.
The team heads to the lab of researcher John Tyndall, who demonstrates how a piece of metallic slag could have a disastrous effect on the mechanical and electrical systems of the B-25.
This is a very close approximation of what that slag might have been or might have looked like. And because it has some ferrous metal in it, it could be magnetic. Well, what we have here is a relay, such as you might find on that airplane. In fact, there's probably dozens of them on the airplane. Now, if they set that slag down or moved it during flight, it's possible that a magnetic field could come and defeat the relay.
As the magnet approaches the relay, the switch fails. If the reported UFO debris was magnetically charged, it would have affected multiple switches and motors inside the B-25. A failing relay could also put the B-25's electrical system in jeopardy.
Now, the B-25 had 120 amps of power to run everything from the turrets to starter motors to whatever, and they all were controlled by relays. What we have set up here is a situation where we can create a dead short, such as if a motor or something went fluid.
So you're running 120 amps through a 20 amp circuit.
Meaning the circuit wouldn't be able to handle that it's being overloaded.
I think you can be the judge of that.
Oh.
As you can see, the wire was literally vaporized.
John has one more theory. He's demonstrated how highly magnetic slag could have affected both the electrical and the mechanical systems of the plane. But is it possible that the very composition of the slag itself caused the plane to crash?
All right, I'm going to use a arc welder to spark this slag off, much as might have happened that night with the B-25. Stand by. Okay, look.
Whoa!
Whoa! Wow!
So that is burning slag, and look at how it's smoldering.
Right.
Still.
Mm-hmm. Well,
would that burning slag be of a temperature that would eat through the aluminum on the plane?
This slag, it's around 4,000 degrees that slag is burning.
And aluminum melts at?
1,200 degrees.
Aluminum is one of the main components in the fuselage, skin, and wings of a B-25. A 4,000-degree fire inside the structure would be devastating.
If on the B-25 there was a short circuit, and the short circuit got to the slag, it's very possible that there could have been a reaction similar to this.
Is this the same type of aluminum that the fuselage would have been made out of, or the wings, or?
Same kind of aluminum. You know, these are all things that, in the right combinations, can be very combustible and have quite an exothermic reaction. Stand by. Look.
Whoa!
Oh!
Whoa!
If the plane carried that slag and experienced an electrical fire at 4,000 degrees, you're looking at the result on the hull.
This fire was different from a normal fire or even a gasoline fire in that it was white hot. So this would have seared through any metal and caused a whole lot of problems on that plane. It's one thing to hypothesize, well, it could have been this, and it's another to see it with our own eyes, that yes, you can spark slag. Slag can produce a combustion, an explosion, which can burn through metal, which would lead to something like the crash of a B-25. And one of the possibilities is that we're dealing with UFO debris that may have caused this crash.
So, gentlemen, we are back from Tyndall's lab. We're back from Kelso.
Although we weren't allowed to dig up all the wreckage, we were able to dig up some really good debris. And we were able to really determine that a fire could occur. You know, there was a reason that this plane could have caught fire.
So of all the evidence in the case, the samples that Pat found while scuba diving are definitely out. But the samples we were able to analyze in Dr. Sam's lab, obviously we didn't find any smoking gun, that there was definitely some sort of UFO or extraterrestrial involvement. But on the other hand, nothing to disprove that.
Nobody's really been to the site over those 60 years after the Air Force cleaned it up. We were there, we retrieved material, we tested material, we found reputable scientists to evaluate the material. We reconstructed the final moments of the crash of that B-25. We're bringing science to ufology. Speculation out the window, science right here.
Many samples proved inconclusive, but experts say there are definite signs of anomalous activity surrounding both the Maury Island UFO incident and the Kelso crash site. What really happened may never be fully known, but witnesses are certain that something took place in the Maury Island Sound one summer's night in 1947. Did it cause bodily injury to witnesses? And was it enough to set off a chain reaction that resulted in the deaths of 2 Army pilots? The mystery continues.
In the world of UFO reports, you got 90% of them total bull, okay? Either delusional, either out-and-out hoaxes, or honest mistakes. Fact is, there are 10% that are absolutely real. We will find it because it is there. And when we find it, we will prove it.